Welcome back to the program. Dana Lash here with you. If you're listening to the program being broadcast across the country, coast to coast, hundreds of affiliates, that's some Little Guns N' Roses Chinese democracy. If you're watching the simulcast, you're going to see my friend Stephen Yates join us from his interesting Lego bunker in an undisclosed location, one of the most secretive men alive. And Stephen Yates, as you know, has worked in the Bush administration advising former VP Dick Cheney. He knows everything that you would want to ever know about foreign policy. And he's also the senior fellow at America First Policy Institute and chair of China Policy Initiative. So he is the perfect person. And we are geared up to ask him a million questions about this. And Stephen, always good to see you. I'm just going to ask a very wild question. The Solomon Islands have always had a good relationship with the United States. Now there's this story coming out where it looks as though one of our ships, which routinely would get refueled in Solomon Islands, asked for permission to dock to get refueled, and they were denied because China apparently is getting very, very cozy with the Solomon Islands. Have we lost them?
Well, we've certainly lost them, at least temporarily. It matters a lot more than people might think. I mean, my grandpa Luff was a two-term Marine that served in the Solomon Islands. The Parliament building in the Solomon Islands was built by the United States. The United States invested a lot. And if you look on a map where the Solomon Islands are, you'll see that it's really close to Australia. It's very important to the island chain that secures the Western Pacific. That's why it was vital to the United States in fighting the Japanese at the time. The Chinese have for a long time engaged in this policy of buying up small island governments. I mean, it's not like the Pacific Islands are the only place where the Chinese communists throw around filthy lucre to capture leaders.
Right.
We may have read about it about some American politicians. I don't know. But in the Solomon Islands, this is serious because of its proximity. And frankly, we need allies like Australia not to be killing themselves with COVID lockdown policies and focusing first and foremost on projecting their influence, because a little bit of Australian effort and money and a little bit of American effort and money can keep places like this on side. I hear there's elections coming up at some point in Solomon Islands. I know everyone woke up today wondering when's the next election in the Solomon Islands.
Well, it's important. I like how it's very dry how he asks that, talking with Stephen Yates. I mean, the reason and I'm a huge World War II buff, and so that's why I was like, oh my gosh, Solomon Islands, because it was a Coast Guard vessel. My first thought was, wow, we have Coast Guard that goes out that far routinely now. And this was it was such a routine request. I can't remember the frequency as to which this happens, but it was the US Coastguard cutter received no response from Solomon Island authorities when it requested permission to stop and refuel. John Kirby got involved. He confirmed this to the press with National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications. And as you said, there's that moratorium. And it's not just us. A British vessel apparently was also denied permission to dock. And so they're saying, they're just reviewing their policies. But apparently China still has a delegation on the island. They're not being refused docking, and there's nothing that's changed with them. How troubling is this? Because I immediately go into, I like to look at every single scenario and figure out a response for every single scenario. So my thought is, okay, is this step one into conflict with China? How is this resolved? I mean, surely there's a diplomatic way to resolve this, but we have President McUnity Cheesebrain in the White House, and he's getting ready to make a speech later today yelling at all of us for criticizing the FBI. So I don't really think that it's going to be them that does this.
Well, I mean, that's a fair doubt to have. And unfortunately, it's backed up by coming up on 2 years of evidence around the world. I mean, there's one way to look at it as the Chinese being the aggressors. The other way of looking at it is America seemingly not willing to do the easier and lighter lift items on the list to make conflict with China less likely, less risky. So you ask yourself, if we aren't willing to expend the time and effort together with a major ally like Australia, maybe even bring the Japanese into this, to keep the Pacific Islands, like the Solomon Islands, on side, if we're not willing and able to do the little things, what confidence can you possibly have if the Chinese push something truly big and truly dangerous, that we're there for it and we're ready to basically preserve American interests and allied interests? So it's an extremely troubling sign. that this is the direction something is going, not because of itself it's the end of the world,
Right.
but because of the indicator of our lack of focus, commitment, and willingness to do even the simple stuff.
That's true. Talking with Stephen Yates, and of course, on this point, we have a lot of naval action happening here in the South China Sea, Taiwan Straits. So we had 2 U.S. Navy warships. This was reported in CNN, but it's still factual. It's from it actually came out of their bureau in Seoul. They entered the Taiwan Strait. This is apparently what is the first U.S. naval transit since tensions spiked even more so earlier this month after Pelosi's visit. The guided missile cruisers USS Antietam and the USS Chancellorsville were on Sunday making the voyage through the waters. The transit, there had been no interference. This, how does China view this? And is there, because it always seems as though there's some kind of retribution, rockets go flying somewhere. How does China view this? And is there going to be a response? Because I'm sure now that tensions have spiked, they're going to see this as aggression.
Well, there's multiple decades of behavior where the United States and allies have treated the Taiwan Straits appropriately as international waters. And they would demonstrate that freedom of navigation by having these kinds of vessels go through. And so it's one of those things where the philosophers known as Rush made clear that if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So if you choose not to do these freedom of navigation exercises, you're sending a signal. And if you choose to do them, you're sending a signal. And so it's better that we and our allies do this. To their allies' credit, they've upped the number that they're doing. The United States in recent years has kept it going. Clearly, the Chinese don't like it. They've had their very provocative and expansive exercises, not just around Taiwan that everyone's noticed, but they've pushed way out in the South China Sea. Right. And as we were just discussing, the Solomon Islands are way beyond that too.
Very much so. Keeping with looking at Asia, this news let me pull the story up. I ended up just losing it. Apparently, Tokyo Gas has signed a contract with a Russian operator to get liquefied natural gas. We could be giving Japan LNG, and now they're going to get dirty gas from Russia. This could have been entirely avoided because we need Japan. So if Japan is getting gas from Russia, I immediately think that has to kind of temper any sort of aggressive response they would have if China decides to get a little froggy. I mean, this seems like this was so completely avoidable. It's so frustrating. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and what does this mean long term?
Well, I mean, I think it begins with the catastrophe that is the theology and pathology of this administration against actually very clean American energy and technology. Whether it's natural gas or nuclear, these are actually very clean forms of energy, very efficient. And when you have island nations that don't have a source of their own energy, what do you expect them to do? They're going to need these resources. Tokyo's recently reversed mistakes that a lot of woke countries have made about, nuclear is dirty, we can't do that. And now they've said, oh no, we got to reverse that and build a bunch of new nuclear power plants. That turns out takes time. In the meantime, yes, we should be providing excellent, clean, world-class natural gas. But instead, we've left our allies and the world in the lurch because of a pathology and theology of sort of sun worship by the American left.
Yeah.
Now, it also shows the travesty of our approach to Russia. Obviously, people said that we were throwing the kitchen sink at Russia and there's going to be all this pressure, but they're a petro state. The more that the world depends on them for energy, the more influence they have, the more money they have. So they're going to squeeze Europe during the winter, and they're going to sell things to Japan because America has distorted the market and put others in a bad place. So hopefully we can awaken an America first kind of mentality, use the resources we have, work with the allies we have. But the Biden administration, with this sort of team of misfits, is doing the opposite, and there's going to be big economic and strategic consequences.
I think the way that you said it, Stephen, that America is the one that distorted the market, that honestly should be the messaging that Republicans or anyone who wants America to be energy independent. That's the message that they should be using. That's how they should be talking about this, because now we have Japan, which, I mean, obviously Japan could be hitting the knees if China decides to lean on Russia, one of their friends, because Japan's now, until they get more nuclear facilities built, more factories built, they got to get LNG from Russia, because we're not doing it. We've effectively done this. We have set the stage for the subjugation to Russia because of energy. That is really wild to think about that. Why I wish Republicans were messaging that way.
Well, everyone has to. I hope that they listen. I hope they pick up on it, because it has the added virtue of being 100% true. We have the wherewithal. God gave us these resources. We are choosing not to use these resources. We are the cleanest, most environmentally friendly country on the planet. Only America-hating misfits think they know otherwise. This is just actually the truth, and the world would love to work with us on this. We have the wherewithal to produce and refine these kinds of things that can make the free world go round. Only we stand in our way and make life harder for our allies to do the right thing.
Yeah. One last quick question for you, talking with Stephen Yates, and you can also follow him on Twitter, which I suggest you do, at Yates Comms. So apparently our military confirmed that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard tried to seize an unmanned United States vessel in the Arabian Gulf, and this was yesterday. They said that the quote came from Central Command: the professionalism and competence of the crew of the USS Thunderbolt prevented Iran from this illegal action. The incident once again demonstrates Iran's continued destabilizing, illegal, and unprofessional activity in the Middle East, end quote. And we're still pursuing some kind of a agreement with Iran, just to make sure that's still in play.
You went exactly where my first response was going to be. I mean, you know, this doesn't exactly sound like a good, worthy partner to negotiate with. I mean, I certainly shouldn't be getting more pallets of cash or making more concessions to them. And I think, to make it worse, there's pretty solid evidence that they've been cheating all along. It's not just since the original deal, but even after a breakup of that deal, there's pretty solid evidence that they've been cheating. There's no one addressing their destabilization of the regions, the sponsorship of terrorism, all the litany of things that I think everyone who's followed this for the last 10 years knows. So yes, just further demonstration. Sometimes the bad guys in the world are perfectly transparent, and it's somehow the establishment that wants to pull the wool over our eyes. The enemies are not hiding. They're right there in plain sight.
Yeah, so then we'll end on that note. Stephen Yates at Yates Comms on Twitter. Always so good to see you. Thank you for your expertise and for getting the lay of the land of this down for us. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dana. Take care.
Thank you. You too.